funny how quiet a life can get. Just 8 days ago, my world was a whirlwind of cake tastings, seating charts, and endless notifications from our wedding website. Now there's just silence. The kind of deep, profound quiet that lets you hear your own heartbeat. And with every beat, I feel this overwhelming, dizzying sense of relief. It's a strange feeling to have when your life has just imploded. It's not happiness, not yet. It's the feeling of a man who is standing on a train track, staring at an oncoming light, only to be yanked out of the way at the very last second. I didn't just dodge a bullet. I dodged a freight train, and I'm just now starting to understand how close I came to being completely destroyed. To understand how I got here, you have to go back a little bit, to a time before the arguments, before the lawyers, before the mask finally terrifyingly slipped. You have to go back to when I thought I had it all. My name is Henry Reed. I'm 31 years old, and up until a week ago, I was engaged to a woman named Amelia Vance. She's 29. And to me, she was perfect. We met a few years back, and our relationship felt easy, natural. It was the kind of love you see in movies, the kind you don't actually believe is real until it happens to you. We just clicked. We had the same sense of humor, the same vision for the future. We wanted a house in the suburbs, a dog, a couple of kids, the whole American dream. And for a long time, that dream felt like it was right within our grasp. It was a simple, attainable future, and I was so excited to build it with her. But a year ago, the foundation of my entire life shifted. My grandfather passed away. He was the patriarch of our family, a man forged from steel and wisdom. He wasn't just my grandfather, he was my mentor, my hero. He'd started with next to nothing and over a 50-year career, built an absolute empire. He was one of those guys who just saw things other people didn't. He got into tech investing when computers were still the size of a room, and he bought up real estate in areas people thought were worthless, only for them to become the trendiest neighborhoods a decade later. He had this incredible foresight, but more than that, he had an unshakable work ethic. He taught me that your name and your word are the only two things you truly own, and that a legacy isn't about the money you leave behind, but the integrity you build along the way. His loss left a huge hole in my life. And Amelia, to her credit, was my rock. She held me when I cried. She listened for hours as I told her stories about him. She came with me to the funeral and held my hand so tight, I felt like she was the only thing anchoring me to the world. She was the perfect supportive partner through the darkest time of my life. Or so I thought. A few weeks after the funeral, the will was read. I knew my grandfather was successful, but I had never really understood the scale of it. He'd always been so humble, so down to earth. He drove the same modest car for 15 years, and his biggest splurge was on good quality tools for his workshop. But the man was a financial genius. The estate lawyer laid it all out. My grandfather, in his infinite wisdom, and for reasons I was only just beginning to understand, had structured his will to bypass my parents and leave the entirety of his life's work to me. A portfolio of stocks, properties, and liquid assets. After all the taxes and legal fees were settled, the final value was $15 million. $15 million. I remember just staring at the number on the page. It didn't feel real. It felt like a typo. I was 30 years old at the time, and my brain just couldn't process it. It wasn't like winning the lottery. It didn't feel like a moment for celebration. It felt heavy. It felt like the weight of a 50-year legacy had been placed squarely on my shoulders. This wasn't just money. It was my grandfather's sweat, his risk, his genius. It was the physical manifestation of his entire life, and he had trusted me and only me to be its custodian. The responsibility was immense, almost paralyzing. I told Amelia that night. I remember sitting in my small apartment, the legal documents spread out on the coffee table, and I just laid it all out for her. I was terrified. I felt like I was in way over my head, and her reaction was everything I could have hoped for. She didn't get wide-eyed or start talking about shopping sprees. She just came over, wrapped her arms around me, and told me that we were a team, that this didn't change anything between us. It was just paper. She said she loved me for me, not for my bank account, and that she would be with me every step of the way to help me manage this incredible responsibility and honor my grandfather's memory. It was the single most reassuring thing anyone could have said. It cemented in my mind that she was the one. She wasn't just with me for the good times, she was with me for the complicated, scary, life-changing times too. The next 6 months were a blur of learning. I was in constant meetings with financial advisors, accountants, and the estate lawyer, trying to get a handle on everything. It was like taking a crash course in a language I didn't know existed. Amelia was incredibly patient. She never complained when I had to cancel a date night to take a call, or when I was up late staring at spreadsheets trying to understand the portfolio. She would just bring me a cup of coffee and rub my shoulders, telling me how proud she was of how seriously I was taking it all. She'd talk about our future, but always in a way that felt grounded and responsible. She'd say things like, "This just means our kids will have the best education," or "Now we can make sure our parents are taken care of when they get older." It all sounded so noble, so selfless. It sounded like love. And then 6 months ago, on the anniversary of our first date, I proposed. I took her to the restaurant where we first met. I got down on one knee. I had a whole speech prepared, but in the moment, all I could manage to say was that I couldn't imagine my life without her, that she was my partner in every sense of the word, and that I wanted to spend the rest of my life building our future together. When she said yes with tears in her eyes, I felt like the luckiest man on the planet. I had the love of my life, and thanks to my grandfather, I had the means to give her and our future family a life free from financial worry. We jumped headfirst into wedding planning. Amelia was in her element. She had binders and spreadsheets of her own filled with vendors, color swatches, and guest lists. It was infectious. Seeing her so happy and excited made me happy. Every decision we made, from the venue to the flavor of the cake, felt like we were laying another brick in the foundation of our shared life. We were a team. We were unstoppable. We were building a forever. The money was just a tool, a background detail that made things easier. The real story was us, Henry and Amelia. It had a nice ring to it. I truly believed our love was the most valuable asset I had. I had no idea that to her my only real asset was the one with all the zeros at the end. The final few months leading up to the wedding were, I thought, the happiest of my life. We were 2 weeks out from the big day. The RSVPs were in, the tuxedos were fitted, and the final payment had just been sent to the caterer. Amelia was glowing. She'd float through the apartment humming to herself, double-checking seating charts and talking on the phone with her bridesmaids. Every time I looked at her, my heart just swelled. This was it. This was real. I had found my person, the woman who loved me for me, who saw this massive, intimidating inheritance not as a jackpot, but as a shared responsibility. She was my rock, my partner. The meeting with my family's estate lawyer was supposed to be a final check-in, just dotting the I's and crossing the T's on the trust administration before I officially became a married man. The lawyer's name was Mr. Davison, a kind, sharp man in his late 60s who had worked with my grandfather for over 30 years. He wasn't just a lawyer. He was a family friend, a man who had seen me grow up from a kid who couldn't tie his own shoes. His office was old-school, dark wood, leather-bound books, and a faint smell of paper and coffee. It was the kind of place that felt serious and permanent. We went through the quarterly reports, the performance of the stock portfolio, the rental income from the properties. It was the same stuff we'd been reviewing for the past year. I was getting the hang of it, starting to feel less like an imposter and more like a capable steward of my grandfather's life's work. As we were wrapping up, Mr. Davison leaned back in his chair, took off his glasses, and polished them with a handkerchief. "Henry," he said, his voice calm and measured, "everything is in excellent order. Your grandfather would be very proud of how you've stepped up to this. There is, however, one last piece of business I feel it is my duty to discuss with you." I nodded, expecting him to bring up some obscure tax law or a change in estate planning regulations. "Of course, Mr. Davison. What is it?" He put his glasses back on and looked at me directly. "I want to talk about a prenuptial agreement." The words just hung in the air. A prenup. It felt like a bucket of ice water. The term itself felt dirty, cynical. It was something you heard about with celebrities and billionaires who were on their fourth marriage, not for a guy like me, a 31-year-old who was madly in love and about to marry his best friend. I must have looked confused because he continued, "Henry, I knew your grandfather. I knew how he thought. He spent 50 years of his life, day in and day out, building this portfolio from nothing. He took risks when others were timid. He saw opportunities where others saw dead ends. This," he gestured around as if the office itself was part of the estate, "is his legacy. It was his express wish that it pass to you and to your children after you. A prenuptial agreement is not about a lack of trust in your fiancé. It is not about a lack of love. It is a legal instrument, a firewall to ensure that your grandfather's 50 years of work are protected exactly as he intended." I felt a knot forming in my stomach. But Amelia isn't like that. She's been so supportive. She knows this is about family, about legacy. She's never once asked for a dime. When I told her about the inheritance, her first thought was about how we could use it to take care of our parents and our future kids. Mr. Davison gave me a patient, slightly sad smile. "I have no doubt that Amelia is a wonderful woman, Henry, and I hope with all my heart that you two have a long and happy life together, and that this document is filed away and never looked at again. But hope is not a legal strategy. Love is a matter of the heart, but $15 million is a matter of the law. You have a fiduciary duty to your grandfather, to the legacy he entrusted to you. Think of it as an insurance policy. You hope you never need it, but you'd be a fool not to have it." He explained that the agreement would be simple and fair. It would state that all assets I brought into the marriage, specifically the entirety of the inherited estate, would remain my sole and separate property in the event of a divorce. Anything we earned or built together during. The marriage would be considered marital property to be divided equally. It was, he assured me, an incredibly standard, ironclad way to protect generational wealth. It wasn't about punishing Amelia. It was about preserving my grandfather's work. I left his office with a thick manila envelope in my hands and a profound sense of dread in my heart. The envelope felt like it weighed 100 pounds. For 2 days, I didn't say anything. I hid it in my desk drawer under a pile of old college textbooks. Every time I opened that drawer, I'd see the corner of the envelope peeking out and I'd feel sick. How could I possibly bring this up to Amelia? How could I look the woman who had promised to be my partner, my teammate, in the eye and say, "Hey, honey, I love you, but just in case this doesn't work out, could you sign this document that says you won't take my grandfather's money?" It felt like a betrayal. It felt like I was planting a seed of doubt in the foundation of our marriage before we had even said our vows. I replayed Mr. Davison's words in my head 1,000 times. Hope is not a legal strategy. A duty to your grandfather. He was right, of course. Logically, I knew he was right. This wasn't my money to be reckless with. It was a multi-generational legacy. If something went wrong, I wouldn't just be losing money. I'd be failing the single greatest trust that had ever been placed in me. So I decided to frame it exactly as he suggested, a formality, a piece of legal housekeeping. I'd make it clear that it was the lawyer's idea, a standard procedure for an estate of this size. I convinced myself that she would understand. She was smart. She was practical. She had been my partner in navigating all the other complexities of the inheritance. This was just one more boring, legalistic hurdle to clear. She would see the logic. She would know it had nothing to do with my love for her or my trust in her. She would sign it, we'd file it away, and we'd never speak of it again. I waited for the right moment. It was a Tuesday night, exactly 2 weeks before the wedding day. We'd just finished dinner. We were sitting on the couch watching some mindless show on TV. The apartment was quiet and peaceful. The manila envelope was on the coffee table. I'd been working up the courage all evening. My heart was pounding in my chest. I picked up the remote and paused the TV. Amelia looked over at me, a soft, questioning smile on her face. "Everything okay, honey?" "Yeah, everything's great," I said, my voice a little shaky. There's a boring legal thing I need to talk to you about. It's no big deal, really." I reached for the envelope. As soon as my fingers touched it, I could feel the atmosphere in the room shift. Her smile tightened just a little. I had my final meeting with Mr. Davison today. I started trying to keep my tone light and casual, just tying up loose ends with the estate before the wedding. And he insisted that we do this. He said it's standard practice for any estate of this size. It's just a formality. I pulled the document out of the envelope and slid it across the coffee table toward her. On the cover page, in stark black letters, were the words, "Prenuptial Agreement." Amelia didn't touch it. She just stared at the title page. She didn't look at me. She just stared at the words. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity. The happy, peaceful quiet of a moment before was gone, replaced by something heavy and cold. Finally, she looked up at me. The warmth was gone from her eyes. It was like a curtain had been drawn. "A prenup," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "It's just a formality, Amelia," I repeated, maybe a little too quickly. "It's what the lawyers call protecting the asset. It basically just says that everything my grandfather left me stays in the family as a legacy. Everything we build together from this day forward is ours, 50-50. It doesn't change anything about us. It's just paper." I was babbling, repeating the lines I had rehearsed in my head, but they sounded hollow and weak now. She finally picked up the document, her movements slow and deliberate. She flipped through the first few pages, her eyes scanning the dense legal text. I watched her face, searching for a sign of understanding, of acceptance. I found none. Her expression was hardening, turning into a mask of disbelief and hurt. She closed the document and placed it back on the table with a quiet finality. "So this is what you think of me," she said. Her voice was flat, devoid of emotion. "What? No, Amelia, that's not it at all. This has nothing to do with you. This is about my grandfather. It's about honoring his wishes. Mr. Davison said—" "I don't care what your lawyer said, Henry." She cut me off, her voice rising slightly. "I care about what you are saying, and what you're saying with this contract is that you don't trust me. You're standing on the verge of promising to spend the rest of your life with me, but you need a legal document just in case I turn out to be some kind of monster." "It's not like that. It's an insurance policy." I pleaded, using the lawyer's exact words, but they sounded awful coming out of my mouth. "An insurance policy against what?" "Against me. Against the woman you asked to marry you." She finally stood up, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. "This is the most unromantic thing I have ever seen in my life. We're supposed to be building a life based on love and trust, and you slide a legal document across the table that assumes our failure. You talk about us being a team. Well, teams don't prepare for one member to betray the other." Tears were welling in her eyes now, but they looked like tears of anger, not sadness. "You know, for the past year, I have supported you through all of this. I sat with you while you stressed over spreadsheets. I celebrated your successes. I told you that the money didn't matter. I told you that you were what mattered. And this is how you repay me, by telling me I'm not to be trusted with your precious family legacy." The conversation was spiraling out of my control. This wasn't the logical, practical discussion I had envisioned. This was raw, and it was painful. I stood up to face her, my hands outstretched. "Amelia, please, just try to see it from my perspective. This isn't just a pile of cash. It's my grandfather's entire life. I have a duty to protect it." She just shook her head, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. "A duty to him, but not to me. Not to us." She took a step back, away from my outstretched hands. "I can't believe this. 2 weeks before our wedding, and you're asking me to sign a document that says you think our love has a price tag, that you value your inheritance more than you value my trust." She looked from the document on the table to my face, and her expression was one I had never seen before. It was a look of pure, cold fury. "I'm not signing it, Henry," she said, her voice now dangerously quiet. I am not starting our marriage with a contract that plans for its end. That is not the kind of marriage I want." And with that, she turned and walked out of the living room, leaving me standing alone with the document that was supposed to be a simple formality. But it wasn't a formality. It was a bomb, and I had just lit the fuse. I had a horrible sinking feeling that our perfect future, the one we had been so happily planning, had just been blown to pieces. The week that followed was the worst of my life. It was a 7-day-long argument, a slow, grinding erosion of everything I thought we had. The air in our home grew thick with resentment. Every conversation was a minefield, and we kept stepping in the same spots over and over again. "It's a sign of distrust, Henry," she would say, her voice laced with a theatrical hurt that was starting to feel rehearsed. "It says you're already planning for us to fail." "It's not planning for failure." "Amelia," I'd plead, my voice raw with exhaustion. "It's protecting something that was built over 50 years. It's what my grandfather would have wanted. It's what my family expects of me." "So your dead grandfather's expectations are more important than your living fiancé's feelings," she'd shoot back. It was a circular, suffocating logic I couldn't break. Any attempt I made to explain the legal practicalities was twisted into a personal attack on her character. Any mention of my duty to my family was framed as a betrayal of her. The wedding, which was just over a week away, felt like a distant fantasy. We weren't talking about floral arrangements or seating charts anymore. We were sleeping in separate rooms, the silence between us louder than any argument. Friends would call, bubbling with excitement, asking about last-minute details, and I would have to paste a smile on my face and lie through my teeth, pretending everything was perfect. The stress was a physical weight pressing down on my chest day and night. Finally, with only 8 days left until the wedding, I knew I couldn't let it go on. The caterers needed final numbers. Guests were flying in. We were at the point of no return. I found her in the kitchen that evening, staring out the window. I took a deep breath. "Amelia," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "we have to decide. I love you. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. But this is not something I can bend on. The prenup protects assets that existed long before I even met you. It has no bearing on the life we build together or the money we make together. It's just a legal shield. I need you to sign it." I laid it all out, my final case. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just tired. I was begging her to see reason to see me. She turned from the window and her face was set like stone. There were no more tears, no more pleading, just a cold, hard resolve. "No," she said. The word was flat. "Absolute. I will not start my marriage by signing a business contract. If you need that piece of paper more than you need my trust, then you don't really need me." She had said it before, but this time was different. It wasn't a threat. It was an ultimatum. My love or my grandfather's legacy, my future or my past. She was forcing me to choose. And in that horrible, quiet moment, something inside me shifted. The fog of emotion, the desperate need to fix things, it all just evaporated. And all that was left was a cold, painful clarity. Love isn't supposed to be a choice like that. A partner is supposed to protect you, and that includes protecting your family, your duties, your legacy, not holding them for ransom. Her ultimatum wasn't about romance. It was a power play. She had placed her bet, convinced my feelings for her were her winning hand. I just nodded slowly. I didn't argue. I didn't plead anymore. I just said, "Okay, I understand." I turned and walked out of the kitchen, went into my office, and closed the door. I sat there for a long time, just listening to the sound of my own breathing. I thought about my grandfather. He'd spent 50 years building his portfolio, making shrewd, calculated decisions. He never let emotion cloud his judgment when it came to business. And this, I realized, with a sickening lurch in my stomach, had become a business negotiation. My hand was shaking as I picked up my phone and found the contact for the wedding venue. I dialed the number. A cheerful voice answered. "Good evening, Lakeside Manor. This is Carol speaking." My voice was hollow but steady. "Hello, Carol. My name is Henry Reed. I'm calling to cancel the Reed-Vance wedding scheduled for next Saturday." There was a pause on the other end. Then a professional, "Of course, sir. Can I ask for a reason?" "Irreconcilable differences," I said. and I had never meant anything more in my entire life. After confirming the cancellation fees and ending the call, I felt nothing, just a vast, empty calm. A year of planning a lifetime of dreams erased in a 2-minute phone call. I walked back out and found Amelia in the living room scrolling on her phone as if nothing had happened. She looked up, a flicker of smug triumph in her eyes. She thought I'd come to surrender. "I just spoke with the venue," I said, my voice even. "The wedding is off." Her face froze. The smugness vanished, replaced by sheer disbelief. What are you talking about?" "You gave me an ultimatum," I said, standing my ground. "You told me to choose. You made your choice clear when you refused to sign, so I just made mine. The engagement is over, Amelia. We're done." The shock on her face was profound. It was the look of someone who had pushed all their chips into the center of the table, absolutely certain of their hand, only to watch it all go up in smoke. She had gambled that my love for her was unconditional. She learned in that moment that my respect for myself was not. The next day was our last meeting. We met at the house to exchange the last of our personal belongings. The woman who stood before me was a complete stranger. The soft romantic persona she had so carefully crafted was gone. In its place was someone cold, sharp, and full of a chilling bitterness. There were no tears, no drama. The performance was over. I tried to be civil. "I'm sorry it ended this way," I started to say, but she cut me off with a short, sharp laugh. "Save it, Henry. Don't waste your breath on fake apologies." The word fake stung. It wasn't fake, Amelia. I loved you. I wanted to build a life with you. She finally looked at me then, and her eyes were like chips of ice. "You wanted a pretty wife to go with your new fortune, and I wanted financial security. It was a simple transaction. It was working perfectly until you brought your lawyers into it." The words knocked the air out of my lungs. Security. A transaction. "What are you talking about?" She scoffed, turning back to the box she was packing. "Oh, please, don't play dumb. It's not a good look for you. Did you really think it was just a coincidence that I suddenly got serious about our future 6 months ago, right after your grandfather's will was finalized?" My blood ran cold. The timeline clicked into place in my head with horrifying precision. My grandfather's death 1 year ago, the long, complicated process of executing the estate, and then 6 months ago, right when I was officially confirmed as the sole beneficiary of $15 million, our relationship suddenly accelerated toward marriage. It wasn't a coincidence. It was an ambush. You planned this?" I whispered, the realization dawning on me. I saw an opportunity, she corrected me, her voice dripping with disdain. And I took it. $15 million, Henry. That's not just money, that's freedom. That's a life without worrying about anything ever again. I was perfectly willing to play the part of the supportive, loving wife for that. I was good at. It wasn't I, but you couldn't just leave it alone. You had to protect it. You had to make sure I couldn't touch your money. "It's my family's legacy," I said, my voice rising. "It's my grandfather's entire life's work." "It's a number in a bank account," she snapped, whirling to face me. "And as your wife, I would have been entitled to half of it in a divorce. That's the deal. That's how it works. But you couldn't stand that, could you? The thought of me having any real power, any real claim. You wanted to keep it all for yourself." I just stared at her, speechless. The mask wasn't just off, it had been shattered into a million pieces. This was the real Amelia Vance, a cold, calculating predator who had seen me not as a partner, but as a target. The love, the support, the future we were supposed to build, it was all a lie. An elaborate 6-month-long con job. And now today, I'm sitting in that same living room. It's quiet. All her things are gone. It's been a week since that final monstrous confession. According to the original plan, our wedding would have been tomorrow. I should be a nervous wreck right now, getting my suit ready, preparing for a rehearsal dinner. Instead, I feel an unbelievable, profound sense of peace. The heartbreak I felt is gone, replaced by an overwhelming wave of relief. I think about the life I almost had, a marriage built on a foundation of deceit, Every anniversary, every shared moment would have been a lie. I would have spent my life with a woman who was just playing a part waiting for her payday. The prenup wasn't an insult. It wasn't unromantic. It was a lie detector, and she failed it in the most spectacular way possible. I look over at the photo of my grandfather on the mantle. He spent 50 years of his life making smart decisions to build that legacy. And in the end, I only had to make one to protect it. At 31 years old, I came dangerously close to making the single greatest mistake of my life. I almost handed my future and my family's past to a woman who saw it all as nothing more than a winning lottery ticket. I didn't just lose a fiancé a week before my wedding. I escaped. I dodged a massive $15 million bullet. And I have never been more grateful for anything in my entire life.